friends, Father Kerry here. This is another Holy Spirit moment. This one reflecting on the identity of the devil. For as long as I can remember, I've been listening to the rock group The Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger is even older than I am. One of their albums, which came out in 1968, it was called Sympathy for the Devil, has a song that I am sure you have heard. It is everywhere. The refrain of it is pleased to meet you, hope you guess my name. And the singer of the song is the devil himself. And he is teasing listeners, inviting them to recognize his presence throughout human history. Every time I re listen to that tune, and I do so frequently, I think of the short story Young Goodman Brown by the American author Nathaniel Hawthorne. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote this tale when he was still quite young. He wrote it in 1835. He had just barely entered his own 30s. Hawthorne is a remarkable figure. He was the great great grandson of Judge John Hawthorne, who was the hanging judge in the Salem witch trials, a person who never repudiated the horror that had occurred in Salem, Massachusetts during those trials. And his great great grandson, Nathaniel, seemed to have been haunted by that legacy. Many of his short stories deal with what Nathaniel Hawthorne clearly takes to be the stubbornness and dogmatism and intolerance of the Puritan tradition whence he comes. Many people have admired this short story, Young Goodman Brown, ranging from Edgar Allan Poe and Herman Melville to Longfellow the poet to Stephen King in our own day, and rightfully so, because it is a astoundingly intriguing story about what might be considered to be hypocrisy or what might be considered to be a loss of faith, or as I want to argue here, what might be seen as a deep, deep journey into what I, in one of my own books, have called soul wilderness. So, what is the story in brief? Young Goodman Brown is the main character, and I should remind you, if you don't know, that Goodman is merely a honorary epithet like Mister. In the Puritan days, young men and old men were called Goodman, and young women and old women were called Goody. Brown is an interesting name because it's such a common name. And so clearly, I think what Hawthorne is trying to indicate is that Brown is a sort of every person. So, young Goodman Brown says goodbye to his wife, who is named Faith, and he says, I'm going into the woods for the night. It's just for one night only. I have to meet somebody. And as it turns out, the person whom he meets is Satan. He is a little bit frightened of the encounter, but he's also intrigued. And as he goes deeper and deeper into the woods, he discovers many of his fellow villagers are likewise going to the same destination. He also encounters the spirits of his father and his grandfather, and the devil seems to insinuate that he has captured them, that they were in his service when they were alive. As he continues his journey, he discovers that the pastor and the deacon of his church are likewise satanic followers. He discovers that one of his old nurses, Goody Cloyne, is likewise one of the followers. He discovers that the indigenous savages with their horrific powwows are likewise followers of Satan. And they're all congregating to a spot in the wilderness or in the forest in which a black mass will be consummated. And when he gets there, he discovers that there is another newcomer, and it is precisely his wife, Faith, his wife who wears pink ribbons, his wife who he thought was the pinnacle of innocence, his wife to whom he promised to return after this night was over. And when he sees her, he shrieks with horror and suddenly everything vanishes. Hawthorne asks us to consider whether all of this really happened or whether it was merely a dream in young Goodman Brown's mind. But it doesn't really matter which it is because the point was made. Young Goodman Brown, we are told at the end of the tale, dies an embittered man, suspicious of everyone, a gloomy person, and no one wept at his funeral. How do we interpret this Gothic tale? Because that's what it is, actually, right? It's an example of early American Gothic writing. There have been several different interpretations of it, and I think that all of them are worthwhile. It's as if the interpretations are like Russian dolls. One fits nicely in the other. But what I would like to do is to take off the topmost layers and try and get to the innermost one. So maybe the topmost layer, the topmost doll of interpretation of this particular story is that it is a parable about hypocrisy. And that seems to be pretty clear, right? Young Goodman Brown sees all of these proper church people and respectable villagers who put on a good semblance of moral propriety, but in point of fact are evil inside. They are followers of Satan, even his dear wife Faith. So, on one level, this is a story about hypocrisy. At another level, it might be interpreted as being a story about young Goodman Brown's own smugness and kind of lurid curiosity. Smugness in that he believes that he is saved already. He is a third generation Puritan. We know this from the encounter with the shades of his father and his grandfather. And so he thinks he runs no risk when it comes to confronting evil. But he's also clearly a little curious about evil, right? He has a taste for discerning what it is that so many evil people find so enjoyable. So he tells his wife Faith before he leaves, I'm only going to be gone this one night, and then I shall return to you, and things will be as they always have been. This combination of smugness on the one hand and lurid curiosity on the other is what the story is all about, according to this interpretation. Yet another interpretation is that this is Hawthorne's way of pointing out what he sees as the corruption of institutionalized religion. Faith stands for the church. The wife Faith stands for the church, which young Goodman Brown thinks is a bulwark against all evil, including maybe his own one night on the wild side. But he discovers quickly as he goes deeper into the wilderness that, in point of fact, all of the representatives of the institutional church are corrupt. And so is the church itself, because he discovers Faith, who is the symbol of the church, at this black mass. I think something else is going on, in addition perhaps to all of these. And I think it's a really quite important point for you and me to keep in mind as we walk our own journeys through life, our own faith journeys and our own life journeys. In the first place, it's significant, it seems to me, that young Goodman Brown is going into the wilderness, is going into the dark forest. You and I know that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, wilderness is a symbol of entering deeply into oneself, of going inward to explore and to discover what lies within. We see that the Israelites wander for 40 years in the wilderness, in the desert, and during that time, they are purged, as it were, of all of their demons. We see Jesus going into the wilderness for 40 days at the beginning of his public ministry, and he wrestles with three temptations. And those temptations, obviously enough, don't they? As all temptations do, arise from within himself. He has to face them and overcome them if he's going to continue doing the will of the Father. In Dante, in his wonderful Divine Comedy, we see him telling us that in midlife he entered into a dark forest and was disoriented, was lost. That's the beginning of Dante's own inward journey to face all of his demons, as represented by the three stages in his wonderful epic poem. By the way, if you're more interested in this, you might want to look at one of my books that was just published entitled Awakening to Wholeness. Well, young Goodman Brown is entering into the wilderness. And I want to suggest to you that what's going on there is that he is entering into himself. For the first time in his life, he is really self reflecting. And what he discovers when he dives inward horrifies him. He discovers that he is full of unctuous hypocrisy, just like the people he meets along the way. He discovers maliciousness in himself, just like some of the people he meets along the way. He discovers that he is quite capable of lust, as all of the congregants at the Black Mass seem to be. He discovers that he has all of the qualities within himself that he condemns in other people. He discovers these demons, as all people will discover when they throw over the safety nets of institutionalized religion or proper and respectable society and go into the wilderness. Just like Moses, just like Jesus, just like Dante did. Joseph Campbell, the modern folklorist, argues quite convincingly, I believe, that each and every one of us must go on a hero's journey through our lives. And part of what that journey entails is confronting the dragons and the giants and the trolls and the imps that populate our interior landscapes. Until we can face them, acknowledge that they are there, and overcome them, we will not reach the end of our journey in a proper, fruitful, wholesome way. But what Campbell also says is that in each folkloric depiction of the hero's journey, the hero dies, either literally or symbolically, and then is reborn. We have a hint of this in the sacrament of baptism. We go under the water and are drowned in it only to rise in a rebirth. Well, it seems to me that we can think of young Goodman Brown's journey into the wilderness as a hero's journey. And he is slain in confronting all of the demons that he discovers within himself. But he isn't really reborn in a fruitful way, is he? He somehow can't get over the trauma, the shock of recognizing what is in him, the evil that lurks within him. And he projects it onto the world, and as a result becomes an embittered cynic. He sees the devil's face, and he is able to guess, a la the Rolling Stones, the devil's name. And the devil's name is young Goodman Brown. That's a self-realization that it seems to me is important, but only if we can somehow rise beyond it. Only if we can recognize that that need not be our name, that we can work as best we can, not only to be slain in the hero's journey towards wholeness, but also to arise from the ashes with renewed resolve to eschew unctuousness and savagery and lust and malice and all of the other demons that young Goodman Brown discovered in himself in his sojourn in the wilderness. So, I would really recommend taking a look at young Goodman Brown. It's a very short story, only about 11 or 12 pages, but it really demands, I think, on our part, deep, deep reflection. I've read it so many times over the course of my life that I can't even count them. And each time, new ideas, new opportunities for going inward are given to me in the reading of it. Remember, the evil that we often point to in the world has its origin within us. Can we guess its name? Its name is us. I'm Father Kerry, and this has been another Holy Spirit moment. Thank you so much for watching. If you are of a mind, I invite you to subscribe. But at any rate, I'll see you soon. Thank you and God bless. Bye-bye.